Join us and unwind with a good book. Welcome to Relaxing Reads.
Hi, I'm Deb in Halifax.
I'm Simone in Vancouver.
And hey, I'm Tanya in Edmonton, and this is my first adventure into the Breeze Book Club, and I am so excited for Deb and Simone to invite me along. So yeah, let's get going.
We are so excited to have you.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome, Tanya. As soon as we found out you were a book lover, I was like, she has to be a part of this.
Absolutely. You know, I think I mentioned that I've got about, 4 or 5 books going on my bedside table. So yeah, my only issue is don't fall asleep while I'm reading the book. That's my thing.
I know it's such a relaxing thing to do, and it's hard when you're in a good book and then you're doing it before bed, but it's perfect. So welcome to the team.
Thank you.
So our latest read by Amy McCulloch is a high-altitude thriller that will truly take your breath away. It's called Breathless. Cecily Wong is in over her head. She's come to Manaslu, the 8th highest peak in the world, to interview world-famous mountaineer Charles McVeigh on the last leg of a record-breaking series of summits. She's given up everything for this story. Her boyfriend, her life savings, the peace she's made with her climbing failures of the past, but it's a career-making opportunity that could finally put her life back on track. When one climber dies in what everyone else assumes is a freak accident, she fears their expedition is in danger. And by the time a second climber dies, it's too late to turn back. She's stranded on a mountain in a remote region and has quite the battle for survival against a killer who is picking them off one by one.
Ooh.
So, how are we all feeling after it?
Well, I just didn't know what to expect at first. I'm not one to read a lot of thrillers. I'm totally rom-com beach reads. But as soon as I picked this one up, it had me hooked. I couldn't get through it fast enough.
I actually love thrillers. I mean, I love the rom-coms, but the thrillers as well just it gets me hooked because I'm always trying to see if I can figure out who did it. And so as you turn each page, gives you a little bit, more clues, or it's oh, I didn't know that happened. I thought it was this person. So I find them a lot of fun to read. And certainly this book had me from the first couple of pages. I was just going through it. So yeah, it's awesome.
It was a very intense read, but a quick one.
Mm-hmm.
And my gosh, I have some great respect for the power of nature, the mountain, and those adventurers who were leading themselves, I guess, to discover some inner strength.
Absolutely. I think it was something, I always love to dig into books of things that I know nothing about. And certainly, I am not a mountain climber. And so to get into the book and get inside the characters, and each one has their own experience of why they wanted to go, and then their experiences as they're going up the mountain. And I just thought their stories were so compelling, and I really got attached to them and sort of what was happening inside of them. And I thought about it, and I thought, it's one against the mountain, but it's also in this book you find out that it's you against yourself as you're taking on this momentous task of getting up this mountain. It was just every page was a real page turner for me. I wanted to know what was going to happen to each one of the characters.
The characters were so great, and I love how descriptive it was. I could almost sometimes taste the meals and the warmth of them going down, the tea every time they had tea, because I'm ooh, I feel cold. Yeah. When her lips are blue and she's feeling the chills, I want some warm tea. And I'm I'm not on the mountain, but it was just so descriptive. There were times I could place myself there and almost feel it.
Yeah. All the good along with all the fear that's constantly surrounded them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, the way Amy wrote, it was just so visceral, right? Like you said, Simone, you could taste the tea. You could almost feel how cold her fingers were getting, and getting into that sleeping bag and still not really being warm, even though she had a big snowsuit on. I mean, gosh, these Edmonton winters can be pretty brutal, but so I went, okay, I know what it's like to get into my car when it's minus 30 and the seat doesn't move. I can't imagine, what she was going through because it's such a horrible feeling to be cold. And so I kind of shivered along with her as she was going through her journey.
And the breathing. I was finding that I had to create my own breathing technique to move along as she was in the tent and then facing the elements again. And every step she took, was, am I going to make it? Am I going to make a mistake? And not just a mistake for myself, but a mistake that will affect everybody else around me.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah.
So the lack of oxygen at the high altitudes is said to cause, of course, hallucinations and delusions. Was there ever a point in the novel when you considered that might be the case with Cecily's increased paranoia? Simone?
Yeah, definitely. There were moments where, she would bring up the story of her past and Snowden and things like that. And I thought she's just, reverting to things that have happened to her when she first saw that tent on the mountain. I was like, she's dreaming. Things are going on. And when she would bring it to her team or talk to Doug about it, like they would all just look at her like, you're making no sense. And there were times my mind was pacing thinking, this is all in her head. What if she's the person that's going on the mountain and doing all these crazy things and she has no idea and she's just tripping out? That's totally what I thought. And I think those were it, like when she was first starting to see things and then nobody else was really seeing them, like when we get to kind of the middle near the end, other people are starting to notice things or there's robberies and things happening. But at first I totally was like, she's not used to this and she's totally hallucinating.
Yeah. How about you, Tanya?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was for me, I was always thinking about her journalistic mind, and always wanting to get to the bottom of a story. So I always kind of was thinking of her character in that terms of she's an inquisitive person. And when she sees stuff, her mind just kind of goes, I got to get to the bottom of this. And I'm going to just, push to try to get to see what's going on. So, yeah, I was thinking about sort of what she was going through in terms of the outside world. And then I was also thinking about, she's a journalist. And, because her ex-boyfriend, James, was, he was the writer, right? And he was the one who should have got this article. But Charles chose her. And I always thought, she is so determined to write the best story ever and prove to everybody, since that, momentous failure at Snowden that she couldn't get to the summit, she was trying to prove to everybody, but also trying to prove to herself that she could not only get up that mountain, but she could also write the most amazing story ever. And so I always thought that was something sort of pushing her, and also the effects of 1/3 of the oxygen that you're going up there. I can't even imagine, talking about how the author was describing, how you breathe, and it's like, it's not that you're suffocating, it's just that the oxygen isn't there in the way that you thought it was. So yeah, definitely that was affecting what was going on as well. But I was sort of really going towards the sort of the fierce woman, and writing the best book, because she really did scoop that with the main character of Charles McVeigh and getting that interview, so I thought that was sort of a real driving force with her.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was thinking more on the journalistic side in the beginning when she started out, and that she really wasn't seeing things or hallucinating at that particular point. She was just trying to jot everything down in her memory and kind of focus on how is it going to piece together? What am I going to get out of this? Because I so need this story. But then when they started to, the trek, then you could definitely see that things were changing. Yeah, each step they took. Now that we all know who the killer is, what's the first clue or revealing character trait that you might have missed? Simone?
I don't know. I don't think I picked it up at all along the way that it was him. I was like, it's Grant, it's that Dario guy, it's going to be Doug. And then, I don't know, like looking back, like it was odd that he wasn't a part of the journey from the beginning and that he was going to show up later. So I think in those moments, I kind of thought, okay, well, where is he? What's he doing? But then I thought, what would be his motive? Like, he's the big star. He wouldn't want to be, the person doing all this. And then we later, obviously, at the end, find out his reason for it. But he never crossed my mind until it was pretty much obvious that it was him.
Yeah, we were running characters.
We were. There's like one death and then another one and then another one. I was sort of keeping tabs because, again, like I said, I love thrillers and mysteries. And so I was going, okay, I think it's this person. And then all of a sudden, no, it's this person. And then, so I felt like Amy was throwing up a bunch of red herrings in a way, right? Like she's like, kind of giving little things, when is it Dario or what was that? Yeah, Dario started whistling. It's like, oh, he's whistling. What is he whistling? That's the guy, And I know it in the middle of the book, I made a note to myself that it was, that guy. And I don't know why. I wish I would have written down why I thought, because that was my very first thought. It was him. And maybe it was because he was so detached right from the very beginning. It's like he's there getting them sorted out. And then it's like, yeah, I got all this admin stuff that I have to do and see you guys later. Right. And it was just like, he was never part of the group, And I thought there's something up with this guy. Like, why wouldn't he be involved in everything? And he's quite the showman. I thought that he'd be, up there and like showing people, oh, look at me. But so I don't know whether there was any specific traits. It was just an inkling that I got. And actually, when I was making my notes, as I was kind of going through it, his name popped up about two or three times before the end. And we finally realized, who it was. So, yeah, I love it when books kind of throw a bunch of stuff at you and you have to figure it out as a reader.
Yeah, we're going on our own adventure.
Yes, absolutely.
And I was like you, Simone. I really wasn't cluing in or thinking that it might be him either until it was pretty obvious. But then looking back, I thought, well, he was pretty flippant, over some of the deaths of the climbers as, we were learning more about who was involved in expeditions and, what we all wanted to find out about him. He was pretty arrogant and had an ego, but there were a lot of those minds up there on the mountain. And then, of course, I guess there was manipulation, making everyone believe that he really was an incredible human, the hero or the idol on the mountain. So for me, it did take me a little while to clue into it. So murder and deception aside, does Amy McCulloch want to make you attempt a sport as extreme as mountain climbing or just leave the thrills to your imagination? How about you, Tanya?
Yeah, I think that, I'm sort of an adventurous sort. And so I'm always looking at doing some cool stuff. And I really love to be outside. I mean, something this extreme, though, I don't know whether I would have it in me to do. And one of the things I noted from the book is just the journey to get to, over 8,000 feet. And basically one of the things was the acclimatization, where they would go to base camp number 1 and then they would go 3 or 4 times on the same trail back and forth to acclimatize. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like I don't think I could do that, especially when they got to that wall of ice, where she was, obviously having issues of getting up there. And like, she had to do that a couple times. And I thought, I don't know whether I could do it. Repeat. I think I'd have nightmares.
How about you, Simone?
Well, there was a moment where I thought I could do it. And I walked into the living room and I told my husband, I'm like, you know what? I would like to climb a mountain one day. And he just looked at me because it came out of nowhere. And then I realized once I got deeper into the book, that's not going to happen. I just remember one time flying into India and we were passing the mountain, the 8,000er mountain range. And they said, look out the window, there's Mount Everest. And I was like, wow, that is incredible. Like, that is impressive to see. And I've had friends that I've known who have gone and, gone up to base camp. So that's at about 5,000 meters. And I thought, okay, like that could be something that maybe one could achieve one day, like maybe along the way at some point. But I don't think I could ever plan to go to a summit. Like that part scares
Yeah.
me. Just that, again, that lack of oxygen and all that. I think, for the photo op, if you get to base camp, it's kind of cool. And being in the shadow of the mountain would be something I would love to do at some point. But yeah, like to get there and what Tanya said, like I didn't realize you have to repeat it. I thought you kind of go to one camp, you hang out for a bit, you go to the next, but that constant going back and forth and like feeling the exhaustion in this book, that part of it, I was like, no, this is probably not going to happen for me. And like here in Vancouver, we have the grouse grind, and I think I looked it up because I was like, Everest is over 8,000 meters, and this is the grouse grind is like 1,200 meters, and I did it once because it's like this big hike, and I was like, okay, I'm done. So I'm like, if I can't even check that off, and that's like in the summer where it's nice weather in the trees, I'm like, I don't think the snow-capped mountain and ice and that whole situation would probably happen. So I'll enjoy it through these books, that thrill that you get from reading them.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I've thought about them. I've had a friend, she did Kilimanjaro quite a few years ago, and she was journaling along the way, and the emotions that were brought out, she wasn't expecting. She knew it was going to be emotional, but she had no idea how it would really affect her on a day-to-day basis before she even, started climbing or meeting up with the other hikers or climbers. So I've always thought, looking through pictures and watching movies and reading, something like Breathless, yes, I'm definitely game for this. And then the more you hear about it and the more you know and learn, I think, no, I can't. I'd like to, maybe watch people from afar doing their climb. And I don't know that I would be able to help anybody out because of the fears that I've created within my own mind, or the fears that really do exist that I just don't have it in me to do it and complete it.
That's interesting that you talk about, Deb, the fears in your own mind, because I think maybe one of the themes of this book is sort of, mind over matter. And it's like, testing yourself to be able to do such an amazing feat and all the hurdles that are kind of thrown at you as you go along. And it really is a testament to, I don't even know what it is. Is it character? Is it inner strength? Is it endurance? I don't know.
Yeah. How do you find that belief, or, can you believe in yourself enough to get you through something so incredible?
Yeah.
I think we all have that inner strength, but how do you navigate towards it, or how do you bring it out in yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tanya, you've climbed a high mountain in Scotland. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yes, I did. And actually, I think I buried it away somewhere, because as I was reading the book, I went, wait a minute. And she talked about Snowdon. And then I remember I'd gone on a trip to Scotland, and I ended up in all of Europe, and I ended up in Scotland and ended up living there for quite some time. And it just so happened that I got off a train and I was eating an O. Henry bar, and there was a couple that were kind of seriously, there was a couple gearing up, and I'm like, so, what do you do? And they're like, well, we're gonna go climb Ben Nevis. And I went, oh, well, that's something that I would like to do, because I had bought hiking boots, never worn them. So that is something you should never do, is travel and not wear your shoes before you go. So it was a couple from London, and they were experienced, they had climbed all of the bens in Scotland, and this was one of them. And so I kind of tagged along with them, not really knowing what to expect. And granted, it is not a very high mountain. What did I say? It was like 1,600 meters or something like that. But what I was amazed by is the wind. I mean, you gradually went up this mountain, and then the wind would pick up, and it would literally, like if you had a misstep, it was almost like it could blow you off the trail you're on, and I just sort of copied the couple that were in front of me. They walked steadily. They had their hands behind their backs, which is kind of interesting. They leaned forward, and they just slow and steady wins the race, right? They just walked up that mountain, and I went up with them, and from what I can remember, I remember getting to the top, and there was a flag, and we all stood there being batted like by the wind. It was just crazy. And then, the walk down. So I can't imagine, with Cecily, she's up there and it's like the cold and then that storm that blew in and it's just, yeah, wow. So I don't really have, mine was very, very small, but definitely I can imagine, I guess, in a way of what it would be like to have to climb something over 8,000 feet.
Well, it's just that
8,000 meters, sorry.
Yeah, and it's just that moment, even for you, it's like you there's this big challenge ahead of you. You completed it. You got to the summit. And even in the book, when Cecily gets there at the top and, she describes seeing the sunrise and all that, like that's probably the moment that you're like, okay, I've done it all. And then you're like, oh, wait, I got to go all the way back down now. I was like, can there not be a helicopter that could just take me to the top, take my Instagram photo, and then bring me back down?
I'll take that chopper with you.
Tanya, you've got experience, so you can meet us at the top.
Oh gosh, I didn't know what I was getting into.
That's part of your initiation into the book club here.
Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly.
What a great read. And again, it's one of those things. It was an escape. I'm really glad we chose this one.
I think, and a page turner. I think it makes you want to keep going just because of the characters, and you just, inquiring minds want to know. I'm like, who is it? Who is it? Constantly testing myself to see if I can get it right.
So we have a few more questions about Breathless, and who better than to get the answers from the author herself, Amy McCulloch, who joins us.
Hello, this is Amy speaking.
Hi, Amy. It's Simone, Deb, and Tanya from the Relaxing Reads podcast. We're thrilled to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
We all absolutely loved the book and have a few questions for you, and Deb will start.
So, Amy, you probably didn't realize after writing the book that you would leave us all breathless, did you?
No, I'm glad you had that reaction, though.
Every step of the way. Now, I want to know, have you always had an adventurous spirit in you, a love for challenges and not just the little ones? Are you a fan of high risk and living on the edge?
Well, do you know what? If you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have said no. I had never even set foot on a mountain until the beginning of 2018. So it was really a new kind of hobby for me as well, to kind of see where I could go in the mountains. So I've always loved traveling, and I've loved exploring new places and getting inspiration for my writing. But yes, in terms of these kind of high risk and a lot of suffering when it comes to these kind of activities that I've chosen to do, the mountaineering, these kind of activities, they're pretty new to me.
And what has been or is perhaps the biggest challenge as a mountaineer? Is it the physical side, the emotional? And really, after doing what you've done in these climbs, is there anything that you won't conquer now in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the most difficult part for me probably, it is a real physical endurance test. So, you're really pushing your body to its limits, because you're spending a month living at a base camp where, there's only 50% of the oxygen that you would normally breathe at sea level, except that's where you're sleeping, you're eating, you're resting and relaxing. So even though it's not that high up the mountain, that is still a place that you're camping on a glacier, so there's no running water. All these things sort of wear away at you, at your physical ability, but also to your kind of emotional and mental state. And then the climbing itself. I absolutely love the kind of, I love kind of seeing where my body can take me and really pushing myself to the limit. And on the summit day, when you are up at midnight and you're going towards the summit, that was my favorite part of the whole thing, because, I would never have believed in all my life that I would be nearing the top of the 8th highest mountain in the world, in the death zone, and there I was. But the problem with reaching the top is that you then have to make your way back down again, and you've already been climbing for 4 or 5 days, and you're so exhausted, and you kind of mentally checked out because you made the summit, but you're not safe until you're down and safe. Your job is not done as a mountaineer until you're back at base camp safe and sound. So definitely the coming down was the most challenging part, and I think that's reflected in the novel as well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we just kind of talked about in our discussion, that we were, none of us are mountaineers, but we were surprised that you have to kind of go up, come down, and do so many rotations. I thought, in your head, when you don't know much about this world, you think you'll get to one camp, climatize for a bit, get to the next one. So that part of it just seems way even bigger of a challenge.
Yeah, that's something that I hadn't really reckoned with until I started into mountaineering. But it is quite amazing how your body does adapt to those really quite hostile environments. I remember the first time walking to Camp 1, being fresh to the mountain, my body hadn't acclimatized to the lack of oxygen. And I remember reaching the first sort of yellow tent of Camp 1, and then Nims, who was leading us, saying, "Oh no, our camps where we're sleeping for the night, still another 20 minutes away." And I thought I was done at that point, and I just burst into tears. I just didn't think I could possibly walk another 20 minutes at that point. I was fresh out of energy. But then the second time I came up to Camp 1, I made it all the way up there in almost half the time it took me the first time around. So it really is amazing how the body adapts, and it's definitely a requirement when you're up at those altitudes.
Wow, I bet. So would you compare your journey, your climb, to some sort of a pilgrimage with a spiritual element to it? I mean, I guess your mind is playing games with you all along the way.
It really is. I think what I fell in love with, the reason that I fell in love with mountaineering is that because you have to be so present. And I got that from regular walking. The reason I kind of set off on this whole journey was I went through a really kind of seismic change in my life. I was going through something really difficult. I was getting divorced after only being married for a year, and my whole kind of life was changing. I really thought my life was headed in one direction, and then all of a sudden kind of the ground fell below my feet, and I didn't know where I was going or what to do next. And I turned to walking initially, just putting one foot in front of the other. And I went to Ireland and walked a trail called the Kerry Way, which is the longest waymarked trail in Ireland. And I did that, and I was really amazed. That was the first kind of long-distance thing I'd ever done. And what I loved about it was how present you have to be. You can't be thinking about your social media. You can't be thinking about the future too much. You have to be really kind of present and aware of your surroundings and know what you're doing. And I really found that kind of meditative, so up in the mountains and seeing the incredible scenery in Nepal and just really having to focus my mind, it really did help me kind of achieve things I never thought possible.
It's wonderful.
And it is such a spiritual place up there. I mean, we participate in what's known as a puja, which is a sort of a Buddhist ceremony led by one of the lamas that they bring in from the nearby village to kind of ask the mountain, to provide us safe passage while we're climbing. And it's a requirement, whichever of the big mountains that you do in the Himalayas or in the Karakoram. And it's a really moving ceremony, and it just really grounds you in the place where you are, surrounded by the tallest mountains on earth and also the bluest sky you'll ever see, because you're that much closer to the atmosphere, you're that much closer to the universe. There's some scientific explanation about how the light scatters differently there, but it makes the blues so intense and so rich. And honestly, seeing that makes everything, the whole suffering, all of the endurance, all of the pain worthwhile for me.
Wow. Okay.
And Amy,
so maybe I'll keep it on my list of to-dos.
And just as you talk about the what you're seeing, Amy, I felt like that was all through your book. I mean, we really were with you as you were going up that mountain, and particularly when you got to almost the summit and you described exactly what you're talking about, the blue sky, and you saw the sunrise. I could almost see it. It was just breathtaking for me.
Well, thank you. I mean, I really wanted to kind of transport my readers to Nepal, and it is somewhere. I mean, when I was climbing Manaslu, you sign up to the Himalayan database, which I also mention in the book, and they have a whole list of everyone who's climbed the mountain. And when I signed up, I was only the sixth Canadian woman in history to ever have been up there, to ever have climbed this mountain, and the youngest Canadian to do so. So this is a place where not very many people get to go. And I know I had, such a privilege to be able to be there and in good weather conditions and, just have that perfect moment. And so I actually did sit down in the death zone to write a bit of the
Wow.
because I was trying to capture those emotions and what I was seeing at that time kind of on the page right while I was there. Although what I wrote is quite funny because I was obviously lacking a bit of oxygen because my writing kind of veers down the page a little bit. But I'm glad it came across in the book, kind of transporting you there to Nepal.
And Amy, when you were talking about how you've had this life change and then you started walking and then you just discovered how you just really need that focus, is that sort of where the be bothered statement comes from, where you said the moment you stop caring is the moment you've lost your ability to climb? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that came from the mountaineering training that I did before going out to Manaslu. I was out in the mountains in Wales, in Snowdonia, training one-on-one with a guide who had been out to the big mountains all the time. And I was kind of trying to grill him for any kind of tips to help me once I got out there. 'Cause as I said, this is something very new to me. I was really, throwing myself in the deep end here by going from never having climbed a mountain to attempting an 8,000-meter peak in a sort of 3-year period. And I was kind of trying to find out what was his best piece of advice. And the one thing that he kept saying to me is, you have to be bothered at every moment, whether it's your shoelace is untied, you have to stop and fix it. If before you feel thirsty, you have to keep remembering to drink, be bothered to tackle these small problems so they don't become huge ones at altitude when there are other much greater dangers that you're contending with. So that really just stuck with me, and it was something that I started to apply to other parts of my life, whether it was just being bothered to get up and try and see a sunrise or get out and do some training or whatever it was. I tried to implement that be bothered kind of mantra in my life, and I had to give that to my main character as well, because I knew that if someone like her, a relative novice, was going to make such an adventure possible, she was going to have to be bothered about all those little things and kind of use that to propel her forward.
Yeah, mind over matter, I guess, right? Especially when the oxygen isn't there to try to keep yourself sorted, I would think.
Yes, it's called your personal admin. So even things he would tell me, like if you're applying lip balm to your lips, because obviously you get very sunburned up there, or a lot of exposure to the sun, so you're constantly applying sun cream and lip balm. And he said, just put it back in the exact same pocket. So he's like, in the middle of the night when you're fast asleep at altitude at Camp 4, you're dehydrated, you haven't eaten much, you don't even have to open your eyes. Your hand knows, oh, my lip balm's right in that pocket. You can just pull it out, smear some on, put it back, and you know always where everything is. And just having those taking that moment just to try and make sure that things are where they should be, that you're being bothered to fix all those little things and take care of them, improves your chances of success in a place like that, by an order of magnitude.
Mm-hmm. Amy, I was wondering about one of the things your main character said was that the mountain changed people and it tested all your faculties. And she was commenting because, of course, Ben went and stole all the money from all the people that were going up the mountain. And it was a person she didn't even recognize. So for yourself, how did the mountain and this experience change you?
Well, I think that the mountain made me, it made me a more responsible person. I know that sounds kind of funny to say, but I often found that I was kind of living my life so reliant on my devices, on other people. But on the mountain, you really have to take responsibility for yourself. So no one, although you're climbing with a team, and I'm so grateful to Kasang, who was my Sherpa on the mountain. who was keeping an eye out for me. Ultimately, all of the decisions that I make while I'm on the mountain are on me, and I have to take that personal responsibility on myself. And I kind of found that really empowering, because I found that empowering for my life as well, because I could think, I can choose which direction I take my life in, and I will make choices, and I am responsible for those choices however they turn out. And I found that really, almost something I could skip kind of in my everyday life. Sometimes I could make excuses for the choices that I made, or say I was forced to do one thing or another, or pushed in different directions. But when you're up there, in that kind of environment where it is very high risk, and you are putting your life on the line all the time, because one false move, one step in the wrong direction, and you could be falling 1,000 meters. If you forget one time to clip into the safety line, that could be the end. It's that thin of a line when you're doing this extreme high altitude mountaineering. It really kind of forces you, like I said before, to kind of have focus on the present, but also to kind of take responsibility for yourself and to really take ownership of the decisions that you're making. And I found that really empowering, and I definitely apply it to the rest of my life going forward.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And Amy, congratulations on being the youngest Canadian to summit Manaslu. That's incredible. And it's just such a proud accomplishment.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea when I set out there. It was only, when I got back that the Himalayan database said, "Oh, you're the youngest Canadian woman to have done it." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." It's funny. It does seem like almost every person has some kind of achievement that they want to check off while going there, and that was something I really wanted to kind of delve into, the kind of psychology of that, and who goes for these kind of missions and achievements out there on the mountain, and what's on the line for people, because there's a lot of ego on these big mountains, and that was definitely something that I experienced, I encountered, that I wanted to explore in the book.
One thing I loved about the book is that you brought, of course, so much of your own experience to it, with details about the geography. I love the aspects of all the food and the culture of Nepal. Like, you could almost feel and experience being there, like the moments that you were cold and the hot tea going down. I loved all of that. Now, do you have a desire to hit up another one of the 8,000ers?
Well, I do and I don't. I mean, I would always love to do Everest. It is something that is a goal of mine. The problem is that, it costs a lot of money to do Everest. I think it costs something like almost 100,000 Canadian dollars to do a trip like that.
Wow.
So it's probably something that's on the back burner for now, because there are a few other mountains that aren't as well known as Everest that I would love to do. And one of them is called Amadablam, which is just in front of Everest. If anyone does the Everest base camp trek, you will pass this mountain. It's one of the most beautiful in Nepal. It doesn't quite reach 7,000 meters, but that's still very high, and it's a little bit more technical, but very, very beautiful. And of course, when you're at the top, if you have a nice day, you can see Everest and some of the other big mountains that are out there. So I think I feel so privileged to have been up into the death zone, and I feel like I have done that now, and I can safely maybe not put my body and my family through that kind of risk again. But there are so many mountains and things that I want to see and explore in the world. So I'll never say never, but for the moment, I'm setting my sight on slightly lower peaks.
Now, another thing I thought of, it's amazing that you were on Nim's Purba, like a part of his expedition, because, of course, he's done the 14 peaks in less than 7 months, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
And that documentary, obviously, his film was so successful. Do you have you discussed with anybody, or do you see this becoming a series or a film? Because we all totally could envision that happening with this novel.
Well, hopefully from your lips to Hollywood's ears. I mean, I would love that to happen. Nothing on the horizon at the moment, but obviously that would be an author's dream come true.
That would be amazing. Well, thank you so much, Amy. We all loved your book, and thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, honestly, chatting to you all.
Oh, thank you very much. You're very inspiring.
Very inspiring. Thank you, Amy.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for kicking back and relaxing with us. We hope you'll join us again on Relaxing Reads.